The human mind presents an immediate problem for scientists. It is a completely subjective black box. You cannot put a thought on a scale, and you cannot measure the exact dimensions of an emotion. To study anything scientifically, you need a strict method. In research, a method is defined as the specific, structured path walked to discover truth. Early psychology lacked this path. Because researchers relied almost entirely on subjective interpretations of their own feelings, the field functioned more like philosophy than a rigorous physical science. To survive as a true science, psychology had to aggressively alter its unit of analysis. To change how researchers measured the mind, they first had to change exactly what they were looking at. This chart represents the structural foundation of modern psychology. It is built upon 5 major paradigms, competing schools of thought that each attempted to solve the measurement problem. The history of this field is a direct evolutionary timeline. Over several decades, every new school of psychology invented a completely new scientific method specifically designed to expose the blind spots of the paradigm that came before it. The first systematic attempt to map the mind began with Wilhelm Wundt, the pioneer of structuralism. His work was rapidly expanded by his student E.B. Titchener, who brought structuralism to America and established its rigorous academic footing. Their primary tool was introspection. They defined this not as casual daydreaming, but as a strict clinical observation where the brain actively observes and evaluates its own actions in real time. If you read a poem under their observation, they wouldn't ask if you liked it. They would require you to systematically log the precise unfolding mental shifts and emotional reactions occurring inside your head while reading it. Wundt believed human consciousness could be broken down into 3 base elements: sensation, which is triggered by objective external objects, alongside images and feelings, which form our subjective internal experience. Titchener's 3-dimensional theory of feeling maps human emotion across 3 intersecting axes: excitement to depression, tension to relaxation, and pleasant to unpleasant. Using introspection, a specific state, like anger, is plotted precisely in this space, capturing its exact mixture simultaneously. Structuralism successfully categorized the static parts of consciousness. However, cataloging the parts of an engine tells you absolutely nothing about the fuel driving it. Psychology needed a new perspective. That pushback arrived through the disruptive work of William James, John Dewey, and James Engel. Operating largely out of American institutions like the University of Chicago, they founded the second major paradigm, functionalism. Their core critique of structuralism was straightforward. Dissecting the static elements of the brain offers no scientific value if it cannot explain why the mind actually works. Functionalism established a totally new unit of analysis. Instead of mapping parts, they studied utility. They wanted to know how consciousness actively helps an individual adapt and survive in their surrounding environment. The focus shifted away from internal feelings and toward external stimuli and internal motivations. They measured how individuals adjusted to solve problems. Functionalism asked vastly better questions about human adaptation, yet their methods remained largely philosophical. They lacked the highly controlled, isolated variables required to prove their theories in a lab. In 1913, J.B. Watson introduced a paradigm so rigid it became known as the secondary force of psychology, behaviorism. Formalizing his theories at Johns Hopkins University, Watson declared war on the previous decades of research. Watson's thesis rejected the concept of consciousness entirely. To him, the internal mind was unobservable, unquantifiable, and scientifically irrelevant. Behaviorism adopted the strictest unit of analysis yet, observable behavior. If a researcher could not physically watch an action happen, it did not exist in their data. To achieve this, they weaponized the experimental method. Researchers brought subjects into highly controlled environments with predetermined conditions, eliminating all outside noise. This mechanical flowchart represents the stimulus-response tradition. On the left is the stimulus, the independent variable. On the right is the response, the dependent variable. By isolating these metrics, scientists manipulate the independent variable and mathematically measure the change in the dependent variable. Behaviorism gave psychology the empirical rigor of a hard science, but by isolating only what they could see, they stripped away the entire internal human experience. Later psychologists, known as neo-behaviorists, applied these mechanics to daily life. Edwin Guthrie proposed the concept of single-trial learning, arguing that complex human behaviors are nothing more than simple, single-event reactions chained together. He outlined methods to break negative habits using these mechanics. The threshold method involves gradually reducing the intensity of a trigger over time. The exhaustion method forces a subject to repeat the bad habit until sheer physical fatigue stops them. His third approach, known as incompatible stimuli, proved highly effective at overriding deeply conditioned distractions. Guthrie tested this on a college student who found herself constantly derailed from studying by a specific recurring noise outside her window. Her brain had linked the noise directly to a loss of focus. Guthrie's solution was to pair the distracting noise with a highly engaging, entertaining book, creating an incompatible stimulus. The new book demanded so much of her attention that the external noise was entirely overridden, breaking the loop. A new critique of this mechanical view emerged from Germany, led by Max Wertheimer and the Gestalt movement. Gestalt psychology presented a holistic thesis: the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. They argue you cannot understand human behavior by isolating single variables in an empty room. According to Gestalt theory, natural learning flows from the parts to the whole. True intelligence requires the integration of information, not just a blind reaction to a stimulus. Wertheimer mapped cognition into distinct tracks. B-type thinking is a closed, mechanical loop. Y-type is a chaotic trial-and-error path hitting dead ends. But the highest form is A-type thinking, purposeful, goal-oriented logic that integrates the environment to solve a problem directly. This idea of purpose was cemented by William McDougall's Hormick approach. McDougall argued that behavior is driven by powerful, innate psychophysical instincts. We don't just react to the world, we act upon it, driven by deep internal directives, like curiosity, combat, and self-preservation. Together, Gestalt and Hormick theories modeled the mind as an active, purposeful engine. It organizes reality to reach specific goals, actively filtering data rather than simply absorbing it. If we pull back to our original architectural blueprint, we can see how these 5 paradigms operate today. They are no longer competing theories. Their methodologies have converged into a single, unified tool, the clinical method. This is the center point of applied psychology, specifically designed to address severe behavioral anomalies and help individuals struggling to adapt to society. The modern clinical method does not discard any of the historical paradigms. It utilizes the entire toolkit sequentially, beginning with the mechanical approach of the behaviorists. Phase 1 relies on strict diagnosis. Clinicians use careful, isolated observation to locate the specific environmental or biological root cause of a destructive behavior. But diagnosing the trigger is only the first step. The clinical process culminates in the Gestalt phase, a total reorganization of how the subject perceives their world. Pointing out the mechanical flaw in a patient's habit achieves nothing if the clinician cannot help them cognitively reframe their relationship to the world. The human mind simply demands too much of researchers to be constrained by a single unit of analysis. We are biological machines, reacting predictably to the stimuli in our environment. But we are also holistic beings, actively organizing our reality to seek out meaning. Psychology functions as a true science only because it spent a century building the tools to measure both.